Yamanaka's forest, draped in moss and feathered with ferns, made me feel at home as soon as I arrived. Like the town where I grew up, North Bend, Washington, there are mountains every way you look, and yet you don't have to drive far to reach the sea. To get to Yamanaka, I traveled 3 hours on 2 trains west from Tokyo. It wasn't my first time in Japan. Nearly a decade earlier, I'd spent a month with bike messengers in Kyoto and Tokyo, but I was headed into the deep countryside, far from anyone or anything I knew well. I remember gazing out the window of the new bullet train at mountainsides covered in triangular blue-green conifers. They looked exactly like the motif on the furoshiki, wrapping cloth, my husband carries when he travels. I'd assumed the illustration was stylized. I didn't know trees could be so uniform and symmetrical. Yamanaka means in the mountain. Misty ridges encircle tile-roofed wooden houses and weathered shrines. The smell of cypress and saké permeates the air. Artisans and farmers carry on centuries-old traditions, making tableware by hand and cultivating rice and vegetables. I went there hoping that my 2-month apprenticeship at a saké bar would be a gateway into deeper understanding of Japanese food and drinks. At the southern edge of Ishikawa, a prefecture that spoons the Sea of Japan, Yamanaka belongs to a region that's been dismissively referred to as Ura Nihon, the backside of Japan. Because of its isolation, Ishikawa's agricultural, fishing, and craft communities have been slow to give up old-fashioned ways. Now, the precise thing that drew disdain makes Ishikawa a destination for avant-garde chefs and discerning travel editors searching for the version of Japan held up in the country's own mythology and romanticized in the West. Yamanaka claims a 1,300-year history of tourism because of its hot springs, but most of its visitors still come from within Japan and other Asian countries. Looking at its tourism data over the past 100 years is like watching the ups and downs of the Japanese economy. The number of visitors gradually increased after World War II, then peaked in the 1970s and again in the 1990s. Most years in the past half-century, about 500,000 people visited Yamanaka. Fewer than 8,000 people live in the town and its surrounding villages, and that number is shrinking. And yet, young artists, designers, and entrepreneurs move there to make a life in the countryside. Students come from all over Japan to study at the woodturning school and apprentice with master craftsmen. There are few salarymen in Yamanaka. Most people are hospitality workers, business owners, or artisans. The evergreens I saw from the train are sugi, Japanese cedar, I was told. But they're different from what I know as cedar. The bark of sugi does resemble the strips I peeled off the trunks of western red cedar as a child, bending it back and forth until it became pliable, marveling that indigenous people made clothes from these scratchy fibers. I would crush flat, scaled red cedar leaves between my palms to release their fragrance, and find them later crumbled in my pockets. I didn't recognize the spiky fingers of sugi leaves. It turns out that neither sugi, Cryptomeria japonica, nor western red cedar, Thuja plicata, is a true cedar. They're both in the cypress family. In Yamanaka, I had many revelations that what I'd been told about Japan was not exactly right, that there weren't always analogs in American culture, that translations were often hasty and imprecise. Another kind of cypress tree, hinoki, Chamaecyparis obtusa, looks more like the evergreens I know. Its fragrant wood is used to build shrines, temples, and fancy baths. In Yamanaka, there is a bridge, Koorogibashi, built entirely of perfumey pink hinoki wood, where tourists take photos of fiery-colored maple leaves over the aquamarine Daishoji River. If you look past the picturesque scene, there are clear cuts on the mountainsides, like the ones I remember from North Bend. Almost 70% of Japan's land is covered in trees, but much of this wilderness is in a sense constructed, planted for lumber or stewarded for fuel and raw materials after widespread deforestation.